Hello, my friend. I'm really glad you're here. Let's take a quiet moment together. Before we begin, imagine a cold morning in Virginia. The year is 1732. A small farmhouse stands under a pale winter sky. The air is sharp. Your breath makes small clouds. Around you, the land is quiet. Fields stretch in every direction. The trees are bare. The world is still. Inside that farmhouse, a baby boy has just been born. No one in that quiet room could imagine his future. No one could guess that this small, crying child would one day lead an army through impossible winters, that he would help build a new nation, that he would become the first president of a country that did not yet exist. His name was George Washington, and here is the detail that most people never hear. It is not about a famous battle. It is not about the Declaration of Independence. It is about a quiet, private choice he made near the end of his life, a choice so unexpected that it may completely change the way you think of him. I will share that detail before this story ends. So stay close. In this video, we will walk together through the life of George Washington. We will discover how a fatherless boy became one of history's most trusted leaders. We will feel what it was like to stand at the edge of an impossible war and choose to fight anyway, and we will find out what he did with all his power when the war was finally over. So make yourself comfortable and let the story begin. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. His family were farmers. They were not poor, but they were not powerful. Life was simple, and the days were full of work. His father, Augustine Washington, managed farms and plantations. His mother, Mary Ball Washington, was strong and serious. She believed that children should learn discipline early, not because she was cruel, because life in colonial Virginia demanded it. In the 1700s, children grew up fast. There were no hospitals nearby. There was no easy medicine. A small illness could quickly turn into something much worse. Families lost children often. Every home understood how fragile life could be. So George grew up watching adults work, plan, and survive. He learned early that life did not always offer comfort first. Sometimes it offered only responsibility. That lesson would shape him forever. Then, when George was only 11 years old, something changed everything. His father, Augustine, passed away. Losing a father is painful in any time or place. But in George's world, it also changed the family's future completely. There was no safety net, no government help. His mother, Mary, had to raise the children alone, with discipline, with strength, and with very little room for softness. Because George was not the oldest son, he did not inherit much of the family land. His older half-brothers received more. George had to understand something difficult very early. He could not wait for life to become easy. He would have to build his own path. This loss did not make him soft. It made him serious, and quietly, pain began to shape a future leader. Unlike many wealthy young men of his time, George Washington did not receive a long formal education. He did not attend a famous school. He did not go to a university. Instead, he had private tutors and family lessons. He studied reading, writing, and mathematics. He practiced careful manners, Because in Virginia society, how you behaved in public mattered greatly. But perhaps his most important education came not from books. It came from watching people. It came from listening to older men, especially his older half-brother Lawrence, who had served in the British military. Lawrence showed George what discipline looked like, what confidence looked like, what responsibility felt like from the inside. And then there is a famous story. The story says that young George received a small axe as a gift. Curious, as children are, he went into the garden and cut down a cherry tree. When his father saw the tree and asked who had done it, George said simply, "I cannot tell a lie. I did it." His father forgave him. Today, most historians believe this story was probably invented. A writer named Mason Locke Weems included it in a biography of Washington published around 1800. It was likely meant to teach young readers about honesty, not to record a real event. But the story survived because it pointed at something people could feel was true. Honesty was a value that followed George Washington his entire life. By the time George was 16, he knew he needed to find his own way. He could not wait for wealth to arrive. He needed work, he needed skill, and he needed courage. He found all three in a surprising place, the wilderness of Virginia. At 16, George became a land surveyor. A surveyor is someone who measures land carefully, draws accurate maps, and records the exact boundaries of property. In a growing colony, where land meant farms, homes, money, and future dreams, a good surveyor was a very valuable person. It was not easy work. George walked through thick forests. He crossed cold rivers. He slept outside under open sky. The land he measured was sometimes dangerous, and the weather was not always kind. But this work made his body strong and his mind careful. By 17, people had begun to respect him. He arrived on time. He measured with precision. He wrote clear notes. He dealt honestly with landowners and workers alike. Slowly, he was no longer simply a fatherless boy from a farming family. He was becoming someone people could trust. And trust, as you will see, is where all true leadership begins. But just as his path was becoming clear, sadness returned. George's older half-brother, Lawrence, had been like a second father to him. Lawrence had guided him, encouraged him, and opened a wider world. But Lawrence became very ill with tuberculosis, a dangerous disease that attacks the lungs, making it very difficult to breathe. In those days, it was often deadly. George traveled with his brother to warmer places, hoping the air might help. But hope was not enough. In 1752, Lawrence passed away. George had already lost his father as a boy. Now he had lost his closest guide. Once again, life was asking him to grow stronger than he felt ready to be. But beyond his private grief, the world outside Virginia was shifting. Britain and France were both trying to control the same land in North America. Both wanted the rich river valleys to the west, and both were moving toward a conflict that would pull many young men into its path, including George Washington. In 1753, the British needed someone brave enough to carry an important message deep into the wilderness, to find the French commander and deliver a warning. Leave this land. They chose George Washington. He was only 21 years old. The journey was brutal. It was a march through deep forests, across frozen rivers, through wind and cold that few men would choose to face. At one point, Washington fell from a raft into an icy river. He survived by grabbing a log and pulling himself to shore. He delivered the message. The French refused to leave. Washington returned with the information the British needed. For a young man of 21, simply completing that mission was already impressive. The following year, 1754, Washington was given command of about 150 soldiers and sent back to the same region. This time, not to carry a message. This time, to face the French directly. He and his men built a small wooden fort. They called it Fort Necessity. The name itself was honest. They built it out of necessity, in an exposed place, with little protection around them. The French came with a much stronger force. Rain fell for hours. The ground turned to mud. Washington's men were tired, outnumbered, and unprepared for a long battle. After hours of confusion and fear, Washington had no choice. He surrendered. It was a painful defeat. But inside the pain, there was a lesson that no classroom could teach. Courage is not enough without preparation. A leader must think before danger comes, not only during it. Fort Necessity was not the end of Washington's story. It was the beginning of his education. If you are finding this story helpful for your English, please subscribe. New stories arrive every week, and each one is made for you. After Fort Necessity, the conflict between Britain and France grew into a much larger war, known as the French and Indian War, a long struggle for control of North America. Washington was still young, but he had already seen how dangerous this land could be. In 1755, he joined a British campaign led by General Edward Braddock. Braddock was experienced and confident. He believed in the traditional European style of warfare. Soldiers marching in straight lines, facing the enemy in the open. But the forests of North America were different. The trees were dense. The paths were narrow. The enemy could hide in the shadows and strike without warning. Washington understood this. He had walked these forests. He had measured this land. He had slept under these trees. But General Braddock did not listen. Near the Monongahela River, French and Native American fighters attacked from hidden positions. Smoke filled the air. Gunfire came from everywhere and nowhere. The British soldiers were trained for a different kind of war, and they could not adapt quickly enough. General Braddock was shot and badly wounded. The soldiers began to break apart in panic, but Washington stayed calm. He rode through the smoke and the noise, carrying messages, trying to hold the retreat together. 2 horses were shot from under him. Bullets passed through his coat. He was not wounded. People who heard this story later spoke of it with wonder. Some believed he had been protected by something greater than luck. Washington helped organize the retreat and saved many lives that day. His reputation across the colonies grew quickly. But inside, Washington was also beginning to feel something quieter. He had served the British faithfully. He had risked his life for their cause. And yet British-born officers were often treated as superior to colonial soldiers like himself. That feeling of unfairness stayed with him. It did not yet become anger. It was only a quiet wound. But quiet wounds, ignored long enough, have a way of becoming something much larger. By 1758, Washington had grown tired of war. He had seen blood and fear and confusion. He had learned more than he ever expected to learn. He left the military and returned to Mount Vernon. He was only 26 years old. In 1759, he married Martha Dandridge Custis, a capable widow with 2 young children. Martha was intelligent and experienced. She understood how to manage a large household. She brought warmth and stability into Washington's life. Together, they made Mount Vernon the center of their world. Washington studied new farming methods. He managed his estate carefully. He wrote long letters. He welcomed guests. He became one of the most respected men in Virginia. For a few years, history seemed willing to let him rest. But it was not. Through the 1760s and 1770s, tension between Britain and the American colonies grew deeper and harder. The British government imposed new taxes. The colonists had no representatives in the British Parliament. They were told to pay, but they had no voice in the decisions. Farmers, merchants, ordinary families, all of them began to feel something they could not easily name, the feeling of being controlled by a power that did not see them as equals. Washington understood this feeling very well. By June of 1775, the Second Continental Congress had made their decision. An army would be raised to fight for independence, and they needed someone to lead it. They chose George Washington. He accepted, but privately he wrote to Martha that he did not feel sure he was equal to the task. That honesty, that private doubt, even in a moment of public acceptance, tells us something important about the man. What Washington received was not a great army. It was a collection of brave men who were hungry, undertrained, and poorly equipped. Many had no proper uniforms. Some had old weapons. Some had almost no weapons at all. Across the ocean stood the British Army, powerful, professional, and well supplied. Washington could not win by strength alone. He understood this from the beginning. He would have to win by patience, strategy, and the kind of stubborn, quiet belief that refuses to die even when everything seems lost. The war lasted 8 long years. Washington did not win every battle. He lost many. The winter at Valley Forge in 1777 to 1778 was perhaps the darkest hour. Thousands of soldiers were sick. Feet were wrapped in rags. Food was scarce. Men died not only from battle, but from cold and exhaustion. And Washington stayed with them. He did not retreat to a warm house. He did not write letters from a comfortable distance. He stayed in the cold with his men, and his presence alone gave many of them a reason to remain. Sometimes, leadership is not a strategy. It is simply staying when every instinct tells you to go. The final great moment came in 1781 at Yorktown, Virginia. With the crucial help of the French Army and Navy, Washington surrounded the British forces. After years of sacrifice, the impossible finally became real. The British surrendered. America was free. And now, my friend, here is the detail I promised at the very beginning. After the war, many people admired Washington with a word they did not use lightly: king. They wanted him to take power. to remain in control, to lead not just an army, but a nation for as long as he lived. He refused. When the war ended, he resigned his military commission and returned to Mount Vernon. He said, in words both simple and extraordinary, that power should return to the people. And later, when he did serve as the first president, twice, he refused a third term, not because the law demanded it. There was no such law yet. He refused because he believed a free country must never depend on one man. That choice, that quiet, voluntary surrender of power, is perhaps the most remarkable thing about him. He did not fight for a country he could rule. He fought for a country that could govern itself. George Washington's story asks us something simple. What would you do with power if you had it? He had everything that powerful people dream of, an army that loved him, a nation that trusted him, a legend already growing around his name. And he chose to give it back. That is a kind of courage that battles cannot teach. It is the courage of character. And in a quieter way, that is also the courage you are practicing every time you sit down to learn English. You are not studying for a test. You are building something larger than a grade. You are building a bridge between where you are and where you want to go. One word at a time. One story at a time. Every lesson you finish is a small surrender of comfort and a quiet act of becoming. Washington did not wake up one day as a great leader. He became one. Slowly, through loss, through failure, through years of learning in the cold. Your path is not so different. You are already further along than you think. Keep going. The road is long, but you are already on it. That was the story of George Washington. If these stories are helping you grow in English, subscribe to InkWell English. New stories arrive every week, and every one is made for you. Tell me in the comments, what would you carry on your own road? I would really love to know.